Hello, my name is Rick Lewis. I'm with Phenom Hoop Report. On today's Coach's Corner, we have Coach Karl Molnar from Terry Sanford High School. Welcome, Coach.
Thank you, sir.
Coach, you started out coaching girls basketball, and you won 3 state championships for Fayetteville Academy in 1999, 2000, and 2001. You have a very interesting background story to tell, but first of all, tell us how you got to Fayetteville, North Carolina.
Well, I was a military rat, I guess, born in Okinawa, a little place not many people have heard of unless you are in the military circles, and came to Fayetteville, North Carolina, right on the age of 4 or 5, and Dad retired, and I've been here ever since. So I don't know any other home other than Fayetteville.
Now, Coach, I'm sure you played some basketball growing up, but more importantly, you were a pretty good soccer player. And your soccer skills led you to Fayetteville Academy, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, my dad played in Europe. It taught me at a young age, coached a lot of my teams as I was growing up. And I was, this was, 100 years ago, I was playing soccer in this area, it seems like. So I was probably a little ahead of my time and was a pretty good little soccer player. In fact, when I transferred from public school to Fayetteville Academy, the public school in my district didn't even have a soccer program. So that year, I think the year or the year after I transferred, it was mandatory that all the high schools had to have soccer programs. But I had already come over here. Fayetteville Academy had a soccer program. It was not in its prominence at the time, but I feel like we were kind of the beginning of that. We were able to win 3 state championships while I was there as a player.
Well, after you graduated from Fayetteville Academy, you attended UNC Charlotte for 2 years. But then you transferred to Fayetteville State. Talk about that.
Yeah, that's another interesting twist to the story. I was one of those kids that was in a major and doing fine, but just wasn't feeling the major, wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to be when I grew up. And interestingly enough, at the time, was, I'm a football fan like anybody else, and was, watching football going, hey, I grew up playing soccer. I can kick a field goal as good as those guys. But I had never pursued that because Fayetteville Academy doesn't have a football program. So I got an itch one summer and just started training, and then went over to Fayetteville State University, which is the local university, and knocked on the coach's door and said, hey, I want to kick field goals for you next year. And he's like, all right, well, come on in the office, talk to me. He said, where'd you go to high school? And I said, well, Fayetteville Academy. And he kind of scratched his head and said, well, they don't have a football team there. I said, yeah, I know. I've never played football before. And he kind of leaned back in his chair like, oh, God, this guy's wasting my time. And then he said, how long you been in school here at Fayetteville State? I said, well, I'm not a student at Fayetteville State. I'm at UNC Charlotte. And he's just like, oh, God. But he was nice enough to say, come on out next Tuesday. We'll give you a look. And I came out, kicked the ball, probably better than I'd ever kicked it on that particular day. And coach loved me, put me on the team, we transferred over, and next thing you know, I'm at Fayetteville State kicking field goals.
Well, after you graduated from Fayetteville State, coaching was probably the furthest thing from your mind, but you returned to Fayetteville Academy and you became the girls' coach, correct?
Yeah, I played 1 year of football, and I loved it. I loved the experience. I grew up playing soccer, and really had never been in a situation where teammates tried to kill each other in practice and then put their arm around each other at the end of practice walking off the field. And that was a whole different dynamic that you see on a football field. And so I learned from that experience, but I also learned that there were so many good kickers. I was a pretty good kicker, but there were better kickers. And my chances at the NFL were the writing was on the wall. That was not my calling. And about that time, the athletic director at Fayetteville Academy reached out to me because I was in town and I was, hanging around the old school and helping kids out with different sports. And they said, hey, why don't you come be an assistant coach? And so my last year of college, I was volunteer coaching at Fayetteville Academy. And then right out of college, the economy was kind of similar to what unfortunately our graduates are seeing right now, where there aren't a whole lot of jobs out there. And so they offered me a teaching job, an income, and some coaching positions, which coaching is, I didn't know it at the time, but that was my true love. I knew I enjoyed it. I didn't know I was going to make a career out of it, but that's kind of where the coaching started.
And then in 1999, you won your first state championship, and you repeated in 2000. Then you had a three-peat in 2001.
Yeah, it was a great run. A great group of young ladies. I always enjoyed. I've been saying this for years. The fun thing about coaching girls is they can be so sweet and so cute, and dress all pretty, and then they go in the locker room and change, and they come out and they're animals. They're competitive and they're athletes, and so I really enjoyed that part of that. And I had a good group that would just run through a wall to do what was right, and we were able to put together some winning seasons. So that was a good run.
You had a good run, and then all of a sudden you decided to do a career change. You got out of coaching. What prompted you to give up the coaching profession and go into pharmaceutical sales?
Yeah, that too is an interesting story. At I guess about 3 years in, I was there 6 years in that stint and won the state championship those last 3 years. And it was about those last 3 years, actually, myself and a friend started a business, actually an indoor sports facility here locally called the Sport Zone. We had indoor soccer and basketball and a rock climbing wall. And we were leasing a building, actually a government-owned building, the Cumberland County Arena is where we were. And so I actually transitioned out of teaching. I continued to coach and run that business. And about 3 years into it, new management came into the arena and basically kicked us out. They said, "Hey, we want to do different things with the building. You'll need to move this business elsewhere." And we spent 1 year in a little warehouse that we found, but that didn't work out either. So we basically sold the business. And aside from coaching, which I was doing at the time, I was kind of gainfully unemployed, just sold a business. I'm like, what am I going to do? And I had several friends saying, "Hey, you need to get into pharmaceutical sales. It's good business, good money." I looked into it, loved it, interviewed, and got a job in pharmaceuticals. And at that time, obviously, pharmaceuticals being a full-time job, kind of had to let coaching go. And it was an odd time because we had just won our third state championship. We had some returners coming back. And so that was a pretty hard decision, but it was a family-based decision. I mean, I had kids at the house, newborns, and it was certainly the right thing at the right time. So I got into pharmaceutical sales, and really about a year after, my friend, Coach Doug Ginn, was coaching the boys team at the time. He gave me about a year to get my feet wet in my new sales position, and then he reached out to me and said, "Hey, if you got the time, come be an assistant coach for the boys team." So I couldn't even tell you how many years. It must have been 3-4 years. I was the varsity boys assistant with my buddy, which was probably my first taste of varsity boys basketball. So I did that with him probably about 3-4 years, and then just got, like you said, 10 years of pharmaceutical sales. And aside from coaching my kids during that time, I kind of got out of high school coaching and really over involved in my kids' sports and making sure coaching their sports and having fun with them and being a dad.
So after that, you spent 10 years in pharmaceutical sales, and you decided at that point in time you want to get back into coaching. What was the thought process there?
Yeah, if you've ever known anybody in sales, sales has its ups and downs. I was enjoying sales. I was having a good time with sales. But the environment of sales was so up and down. And what's interesting in a lot of sales, I guess, you have your way. Same thing with coaching. Everybody coaches their way. In sales, you sell your way, and one year you're at the top, and the next year you're middle of the pack, and you didn't do anything differently. You just sold your way. And so that whole environment, and those out there that have people in pharmaceutical sales, they know that's a tough environment to be in. And so I guess I came home one day grumbling about work, and my wife, bless her, can't thank her enough, finally sat down and said, "Hey, if money didn't matter, what would you be doing?" I said, "I'd probably be teaching and coaching." And so she said, "Well, go teach and coach then." And so I had a good woman still with me today that pointed my ship in the right direction and told me I needed to go back to coaching.
What's the old saying? Behind every good man's a good woman. So she gave you the right direction there. But
She did.
so after you got out of pharmaceutical sales, you had the opportunity to get back in coaching. You became the head coach at Terry Sanford, but on the girls' side, correct?
Yeah, I've spent a year or two with the JV boys program, and Bill Boyette was the head boys coach at the time, and Gil Bowman was in his last couple of years with the girls program. So within a year or two, he had retired, and I slid right into that girls program, and just felt at home. You know, I know I'd kind of taken a little break there, but picked right back up kind of where we were from back in the Fayetteville Academy days.
So you coached some at the boys and the girls level. What was the difference?
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, that's tough. I get that question a lot. It's interesting because the girls, in a lot of ways, the girls work harder. And I know the boys don't want to hear that. I remind them that in practice regularly. But a lot of times the girls just look at you and say, what did you say, coach? You need us to run through that wall? All right, we're going to run through that wall. And they give you all they got. And on the boys' side, they kind of scratch their heads sometimes and go, are you sure you want us to run through that wall? But they also, on the boys' side, they have a little more athleticism to execute some of the things that you're trying to do too. So I've enjoyed both sides. Obviously, this past year was my first year as the head coach with the varsity boys team, and I had a real good time with those guys.
Well, Coach, you mentioned your wife was instrumental in you getting back into coach, and you also have a family. Talk to us about your family, your children, and how important they are to you. As far as you said, you coached them a lot through their childhood.
Yeah, I got 3 boys, which was ironic because here I am coaching nothing but girls and nothing but boys at the house. Guy is 22, my oldest, and as you said, I coached him in soccer and basketball pretty much his whole life. He was. I got pictures of him barely walking, 2-3 years old, when we were winning our state championships at Fayetteville Academy, holding the net, happy to be there. So he kind of grew up a gym rat, as all my boys did. And he is currently, he's got another year left at Campbell University, and he's one of the managers for the basketball team at Campbell University. So he's working on his marketing degree, but because of the way he grew up, he could hear the ball bouncing and found his way back into the gym. He's over there working for Coach McGeehan and learning the game. I know he's got a business major he's working on, but it would not surprise me if he didn't end up in a basketball court somewhere coaching. That's kind of his happy place and where he likes to be. So we'll see how that story turns out. And then my middle child is Miller. Miller is not my athletic child. Miller has autism and has been a blessing to us, and has kind of been our motivation. My wife and I started a nonprofit organization called Miller's Crew, which helps young people with developmental disabilities gain job skills where they can go out and get employment at some point in time, because that's a big issue for kids with special needs. There's so many kids in this world that have the ability to work but don't get that opportunity based on their disabilities. So that's something that my wife is very passionate about fixing. And then my youngest is Davis, who is a big reason why I was motivated to switch over from the girls to the boys this past year. He was a sophomore this year at Terry Sanford, will be a junior next year, and has just kind of been he was a gym rat too, but he's also played his share of soccer. But he loves the game of basketball, and so that was a lot of fun having the opportunity to coach him this year.
Well, Coach, last season Terry Sanford went 18-7, and you mentioned your son Davis, and he came on our radar. But I was looking at his stats, and pretty impressive stat line for your son there. He was a sophomore. He averaged 14 points a game, 8.4 rebounds, 5.7 assists, 2.1 steals, and 1 block per game. It seems like does a little bit of everything at 6'7". I know our Phenom scout, Patrick O'Brien, saw you guys play a couple times this past season, and I want to read you his scouting report and see how well we did on the scouting report. He said, Molnar is a name some may have not heard of already, but if you haven't, you may want to check him out. A 6'7" prospect that can play multiple positions on the floor, initiate the offense, and brings an array of ways to impact the game to the floor. Molnar played point guard at times for Terry Sanford, as he has the ability to stretch deep distance and find his teammates in the right spot. He can also play off the ball with his smooth jumper with range and ability to score at all three levels.
Spot on, as you guys always are. Yeah, he's fun. He's a very dynamic player. He loves to pass the ball. It's interesting because any team he's a good basketball player. There's a lot of good basketball players in the world, but I've always told any coach he's ever played for, he will find a way to make your team better. You might have scores, and he can score as well, but he loves to pass the ball and he loves to rebound, and he understands the game. So he's just that kid. Aside from being my child, just the coach's dream of just he gets it, and as a coach, he knows. As a coach, you're thinking, man, we need to press, and it's already hit his mind. Like, hey, yeah, we need to press. And so before it even comes out of my mouth, he's on it. Whereas, some of the other kids are looking at you like, you want to do what, coach? And he's already like, yeah, come on, coach, you got it. So he's just fun to have around. And in the huddle, we've even had some moments where he's looked at me and said, hey, Dad, let's go zone. And I have a lot of trust in him. As well as that senior crowd that I had this year, and said, hey, you guys feel like we're going zone, let's go zone. Whatever you guys are feeling on the court, we'll go with. So it's nice to have, seniors that have that leadership ability to read the game, and then to have a young sophomore at the time also be in tune in the game and understand what I'm trying to accomplish and be able to relay it out on the court. So it was fun. We had a great season this season.
You remind me of the times when I coached my son Tyler in travel ball, and a lot of times I would be coaching, and he'd come over to the sideline and go, "Oh, Dad, we need to do this. We need to do that." Yeah. And he always had a great feel for the game. And of course, when he would say that in front of the huddle, I would ask the team, "Go, what do you guys think?" And of course, having that son there as a player can also bring that different perspective to the game in itself. Now, in addition, we've been doing this books and basketball thing on Phenom Hoops. And the thing about Davis is he sports a 4.26 GPA. How important is the academics part of the equation as well as the basketball? Because, for us, if you have success in the classroom, you're going to have success on the basketball court. And that saying is sort of custom made for your son, Davis.
Yeah. In my day job as a teacher, we see so many kids that are failing all their classes, but they want to be in the NBA or the NFL, and it's hard to relay to a kid the importance that the physical side of what you have will not last forever, and sometimes injury makes that even shorter. But just as you age, you can't continue to do physical things your whole life. So your mind is your most important asset, and Davis is sharp. On the court with his court sense and his basketball IQ, but he also, I don't know that he's genetically gifted with brains. Neither I or his mother gave him too many brains, but he's got a little competitiveness in him that he doesn't want to fail. He doesn't want to do poorly. He doesn't want to let anybody down. So he doesn't, I don't know that he's outworking anybody. He's not going to be top of his class, but it sure is important to him that he's successful in whatever he's involved with. So we're super proud of him for that, because, so often athletes are so focused on their sport, they lose track of really what's important. And he's been able to kind of balance that as well. He also, he plays soccer as well. So he's a multiple sport athlete with good grades, and we couldn't be prouder of him.
Now, Coach, last year you had a pretty good record. It was 18-7, but you graduate some seniors, and you had mentioned earlier to me that you lose a lot of size. How do you make the adjustments from year to year with the roster that you have, with graduation losses and things of that nature?
Yeah, I guess that's what coaching is. And to me, that's the fun part of coaching is, walking in the gym and seeing what's there, and then developing a game plan around, kind of what you have. And I think most coaches, certainly seasoned coaches, are used to that. That's kind of what we do. And so next year we'll bring a challenge. We're losing 6'6", 6'7", 6'7", all very important players to us. They were seniors. One or two came off the bench, but others started. And as any basketball coach knows, you can't coach size. You can't just say, hey, you're going to be tall next year. So we're going to have to adjust. We weren't necessarily a low post attacking team, but we had a presence in the low post. And so next year we're going to be a little bit more dynamic and have to get up and down the court a little bit better next year.
Well, you have someone to center it around with Davis with the I'm looking at his stat line, and he almost averaging a double-double, but more importantly for his size at 6'7", to average almost 6 assists a game, that's really impressive. And then you look at not only that on the offensive end where he's scoring points and he's dishing out dimes and he's collecting rebounds, but he's also averaging over 2 steals a game and he's blocking almost 2 shots a game. So he's very diverse on both ends of the court.
Yeah, he's obviously we're going to depend a lot on Davis. And Davis, as a freshman on the varsity team, had some very talented players that were returners that everybody in the conference was focused on. So Davis was kind of able to just hide out in the corners and knock down some shots, and nobody knew who he was kind of until the later end of the season. And then he was certainly more involved this year. But still, we had that size. And so we had some matchup issues. You really had to put your bigger, taller kids on our big guys. And Davis, much as he loves to be out top, passing the ball and shooting the ball, he's just as comfortable under the basket because, taller kids at younger ages are always the center and of their team. And he developed that game at an early age. So he loves being matched up with a 6-foot guard who picked him up full court, and they get down, he makes a pass and goes into the post and sits, and he loves being down there. So there's going to be I'm sure he'll get a lot of attention this year. We'll see what kind of player he is this year. I think he's up for the challenge. It's going to be a great opportunity for the cast around him. We got Kalen Keys coming back as a senior, and a couple other 2022s that I think will step up and will surprise some people next year because, again, Davis will get a lot of attention. So I think you'll see some big things from some other players that you may not have noticed before.
So you lose the size in the front court. So what is your goals and expectations for the upcoming season?
That's a great question. I think over the years as a coach, it's important to set a bar. And sometimes you set that bar, or always you set that bar higher than you anticipate you can reach. And so you have expectations. And what I've always been impressed with my teams is that they'll buy into my expectations. And I feel strongly that next year's team has kind of already kind of been talking it up, and they realize what we've lost. They realize what the pressures are and the standards that we set. And so I feel like we'll have some people rise to the occasion and get us kind of back. We really 18-7 is we're very proud of that season, but there were 2 or 3 of those games we left on the table that we shouldn't have, including a couple of heartbreakers to Westover, who, as you know, went on to get a share of the state championship. We had a chance to beat them a time or two and just fell short. So I'm hoping to improve on those last minute game situations. Now we come back with a returning group that understands that, and hopefully we'll be better in crunch time next year.
Now, Coach, you have coached at the private school level, and you've also coached at the public school level. What's the biggest challenge you face today being at the public school side of it in Fayetteville?
Yeah, good one. Well, I coached at the private school level, again, 100 years ago, it seems like. And it was right at the time that the private schools, right as I was leaving, maybe a year or two I coached, where all the private schools really started understanding the importance of, for lack of a better word, recruiting. They would see a kid in the summer and say, hey, you sure could help us here at our program. And so that started really being a big thing as I was going out. And so I know that was a little bit of a role, a little bit of a difference as I was leaving, and is a huge difference now that those coaches, I've got several friends that are coaching at the private school level, and they don't know year to year sometimes who their players are going to be, because they'll they'll bounce around so much, and that's a very unfortunate thing going on right now in basketball in general, at the high school level and the college levels, is kids not quite adjusting where they are, and they decide they want to go somewhere else. I guess from a player point of view, it's nice that you have options where you can go. As you know, back in our day, you come home to mom and dad and say, "Hey, coach doesn't like me. He's hard on me in practice." My dad would just kick me in the behind and say, "Well, go back and work harder the next day. You got no choice but to work harder." And today's generation is a little bit different in that way. And then on the public school side, you have that pull, so your kids are constantly being pulled out. And then the biggest difference I've seen is kind of academics. When I was at the private school, I never worried about academics. Those kids were all sharp and on it and focused. And here, that you got to stay on top of the kids academically. They try. Man, if every basketball player tried as hard in the classroom as they did on the basketball court, we'd be all right. We would never have any problems. But again, too many young people don't understand the importance of their academics, and they just do as little and sometimes not enough to get by, and they miss out on opportunities to play football and soccer and basketball. And that's really been the biggest challenge.
Well, you mentioned like in the transfer, and it does circle down and trickle down. If you look at it at the collegiate level, it's basically, you're probably going to have 1,000 kids in the transfer portal.
Yes.
It happens at the public school level, and it also happens at the private school level too. It happens, I think, at every level. It trickles down to travel ball. It is one situation that is out there. My thought process has been, and we discussed it before, is on the public school side, instead of, shying away from the private schools, I would be one to say, let's go out and play them and just play them head to head. I think it would be beneficial to the schools to do that, just in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mentioned to you, we started a Martin Luther King event here, which is all public versus private, to kind of bridge that gap. And it's nice because they're all Fayetteville teams. All the kids know each other. They play summer ball together, and so it's nice to get them all. It's so just divided at times. The public schools and the private schools, with the exception of those little friendships that have been built. So it was nice this year to get them all in the same gym, competing against each other. It was super competitive, yet they were picking each other off the court. They were helping each other up, and they were patting each other on the back. And so it's a great atmosphere. I do wish, that's tough. This year, I lost a player. I'm coming in for the first time this year, and I lost a player to a public school, and then I had a public school kid transfer in to our program as well. And it was my first year, so I didn't have a part in either one of those. But I think that's just – I think you lose some and you win some as far as players go, and players do what they feel is best for them. I tell most players moving is usually not the best choice. I think colleges – I've had several college coaches I've talked to say, well, has he been with you for 4 years, And when I have to explain, well, his first year he was at this school, and second year he was at school B, and third year school C, coaches start to worry now because that transfer portal, they invest so much time and money in these kids, and then their playing time is a little shorter than they think as a freshman, and so now they want to go somewhere else. So, I wish I like that we've got that tournament started. I wish there were more events where the public schools and the private schools could meet up and play each other and be one big happy basketball family,
Yeah, and we're achieving that. We're going to do an event. I told you earlier too that we're going to do an event in Charlotte. It's the Phenom Queen City Challenge, where we're taking the top private school teams and also the top public school teams before Christmas and letting them play each other. And the response has been great. The coaches love it. The kids especially love it because they like playing against each other. That's the most important thing about it. And also, it's not just kids leaving public schools to go to another private school. You have kids going from private school going back to public, and you have public schools going to public schools, and then you also have public going to private. So I don't think it's any one situation where we can say it's just this situation. I think it's across the board.
Sure. And I think anytime you can get competitive teams playing each other, it just brings out a good atmosphere, brings out the community. So I'm sure that event will do great.
Well, and the other thing too is if, on the public school side, if I'm sitting there thinking as a coach and saying, you know what, I want to go out and challenge the private school teams, and if I beat them, then that could be a good recruiting ploy for me to say, hey, why go anywhere else? You can come and play for me, and we can play a competitive schedule and play in front of these big crowds and so forth and so on. It could be a win-win situation for you.
Yeah, I agree. I just anytime you can offer these kids competitive basketball, they're going to be, the competitive ones are going to be right at home where they want.
No question. No question. And the thing about Fayetteville has to have more basketball players per capita than any other city in the state of North Carolina. We've often said that North Carolina is a hoop state, but when it really comes down to it, Fayetteville may be the hoop city with the quality of players that's come through the city. And the other thing, too, is with the Army base being down there, it brings a very diverse group of people to the area.
It does. And the conference this year was so competitive. All the way down. I mean, top to bottom, you could not fall asleep on the bottom 2 or 3 teams in the conference on any given night. They were slapping you in the face and letting you know they were there. So you really had to be on your game. And of course, at the top of our conference was an absolute battle. Kind of speaks to how good Westover was this year. And DeMarco Dunn, who was a transfer in this year for those guys and has made some waves and has let the basketball community know who he is. And I have the utmost respect for him as well. The 2 or 3 times we played him twice. So twice we played him. I'd put my best defender, my best defense over there, and he handled it like a champ. And for them to be able to go undefeated in our conference this year speaks very highly of what that program was this year. And of course, Coach Stackhouse has them playing hard every year. And then it was no surprise that they went as far as they did in the state playoffs. It was very unfortunate that they didn't have the opportunity to finish out that season because they were in a good spot to win that all.
Well, we got a chance to first see Westover at the beginning of the season. They came to our high school jamboree in Greensboro, and at the time, that's when DeMarco Dunn, I think, just got there. And at that point in time, they were playing, and of course, it's an event, it's a scholastic event. We have 60 high school teams there, and we get a lot of college coaches. And BCU was the very first one to see him at our event. I think that was one of the first offers he got when he was in North Carolina, was at the high school jamboree. You talk about how competitive your conference is. Tell us about some of the teams in your conference.
Obviously, this year, Westover, Terry Sanford, Cape Fear, who's got some Division I players there, and a coach, a college coach down there, and Pine Forest. Those 4 teams established themselves at the top, but you also had teams like Overhills and Smith even snuck up and won some games that you didn't expect them to win. So it was tough. It was every night you had to be on your game.
Well, Coach, for the people who haven't seen your team play, how would you describe your team?
Well, it's interesting because I think most coaches nowadays understand the importance of defense, and will preach defense, and their war cry is defense. And so I'm no different. I'm a big defensive guy as well. As I told you, when I first got to Terry Sanford, I was the JV boys coach under Coach Bill Boyette for a couple of years, and have known Bill for a long, long time, been long time friends. And he is as good a defensive coach as you'll find, and has won several state championships. And so I took what I felt like was a good defensive plan and kind of watched him very closely and learned from him and meshed those two together. And so again, like most coaches, defense is something we talk about a lot. And to the point where my girls and the boys this year, but girls, so I coached the girls, I think, for 6 or 7 years. And every single year we led the conference and actually the county. We could spread that out to the county as I'm picturing county stats in my head. We gave up less points per game than any other team every year but one. And that one year we were second. So coming in last year with the boys, I said, hey, this is a big thing to me. This is where we got to be, and we did. We were lowest in the conference for giving up points again this year with the boys. So that kind of tells you that defense is important to us, and that will continue next year. It's going to be harder because we're going to be a little smaller, and we'll have to adjust a little bit. But it's just old school man-to-man, turn them towards the help defense. And, I got some high basketball IQ guys that know where they're supposed to be and when they're supposed to be there. And I think we'll build from there next year. We'll start with our defense and build from there.
Well, Coach, we look forward to watching your team play, and we also want to follow along the recruitment of your son, Davis. I think he's going to be a very intriguing prospect for many years to come. Should be playing at the Division I level. But we want to say from Phenom Hoop Report, thank you for coming on Coach's Corner today, and wish you the best of luck.
And Rick, we appreciate all that you guys do in helping these kids with their exposure and just educating them on the process. You guys have been a big asset, and especially with everything that's going on now, with the inability for these kids to be in front of coaches this summer. That has affected a lot of kids, as you know. And I know you guys are rolling out some incredible new programs and such that are helping bridge that gap. We appreciate you guys doing that.
Well, thank you. The main thing that we're trying to do during this COVID situation is continuously put out content. We're busy putting out 8 to 10 articles a day about players, and college coaches can read about them, and our new scouting report, and I'll share that with you. And we're trying to do some things to help out the players during this situation. And, I hate it for the 2020 kids, and, especially for the ones that were unsigned. And right now, the 2021 kids, it's going to really affect their recruitment. But hopefully we can get back to some type of new normalcy here in the fall.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Thank you, Coach.
Thank you, Rick.
Uh-huh.